Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our sort of little appendix for those with a special interest in Arabic. We will just touch on a very few points here. This will not be a long lecture, but I just wanted to round out some things we had said before, inshallah. This part really goes back to the Arabic derivations. If you remember from an earlier lecture, we had said that in Arabic you could derive things from a verb. They are known as al-mushtaqat, the things which are derivative of. And we said that at first brush we were going to divide the divine names into two types of constructions. One, which is very common, is صيغة المبالغة, which is the construction of excess or exaggeration, once again without any of the negative connotation that those English terms may carry. And so among those were things like Ar-Rahim, the one who is most merciful, exaggerated in mercy. Al-Alim, the most knowledgeable, with not just knows things, but the infinite knowledge. Al-Ghafur, the one who is most forgiving. And we talked about how both Al-Ghafur and Al-Ghaffar were Sighat al-Mubalagha type constructions, and how there are subtle differences between them, etc. And we also said that some of the things were Ism al-Fa'il, like Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari', Al-Zahir, Al-Batin, and so forth. And we sort of justified that by saying that in areas where perhaps I can do something like show some mercy, then Ism al-Fa'il like Ar-Rahim would not be adequate for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahim, because if I can do it, I do it to a finite degree, but He does it to an infinite degree. Al-Alim, He has infinite knowledge. As-Sami', He is the one who hears all things. I cannot be a Sami', I can just be a Sami', I can sometimes hear things, and so forth. So, but in things where it is the exclusive purview of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like creation, then He is Al-Khaliq. There does not need to be an excess construction, because no one else can do that. Al-Baqi, He is the one who remains. Al-Warith, He's the one who inherits. I don't do that. I will live and die. So the things that are the exclusive purview of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we said they have a construction of Ism al-Fa'il. I would now like to try to round that out a little bit, because if we look more carefully, there's a big category that we have neglected, which I believe also encompasses many of the names, and that is As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha. As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha in Arabic is one of the derivative constructions. It is one of the al-Mushtaqat, and it can have multiple weights in Arabic, if you will. So if I have the verb fa'ala, then weights that are as-sifa al-mushabbaha can be things like fa'il, they can be things like fa'il, which is also the same construction of ism al-fa'il. They could be things like fa'lan, they could be things like fa'al. So those are among the many constructions of as-sifa al-mushabbaha. What does as-sifa al-mushabbaha imply in Arabic? We've talked about what ism al-fa'il implies, we've talked about what sighat al-mubalagha implies. As-sifa al-mushabbaha means something which is an enduring, intrinsic characteristic. It never changes. It never goes away. It is not temporary, but it is intrinsic to the nature of the thing being described. So if we take a look at as-sifa al-mushabbaha under the weighting of fa'il, we see that many of the divine names would fall under that. So we could have things like Al-Kabir, right? That is the same weighting as Fa'il. Al-Aziz, Al-Majid, Al-Azim, Al-Kareem, Al-Halim. So you could see that all of those are part of As-Sifa Al-Mushabbah. And you may say, well, but that sounds like the same thing as Rahim, because Rahim is also like Fa'il. And there are intricate rules in Arabic as to which things are Sighat al-Mubalagha, which are As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha, and sometimes things can actually be both, to imply both things, both that it is done in a tremendous way and that it is an intrinsic quality. For those interested in the subtle rule, As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha is derived from the verb which does not take an object, al-fi'l al-lazim, and صيغة المبالغة is derived from al-fi'l al-muta'addi. But in any case, it is enough for us in this short appendix to understand that names like Al-Kabir, Al-Aziz, Al-Majid, Al-Azim, Al-Kareem, Al-Halim, all of them under Fa'il, imply that mightiness, magnanimity, generosity, largesse, grandeur are all intrinsic qualities to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are not temporary. He is not sometimes Majid and sometimes not. Just the construction of Al-Majid says that he is always Al-Majid, he is always Al-Aziz, he is always Al-Kareem, he is always Al-Halim. Now let's look at Fa'il. Let's go back to Bari' or Khaliq or Zahir or Batin. These, in my opinion, are not really just Ism al-Fa'il as I had characterized them before. I think, and God knows best, that their construction is actually As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always the creator. It is an intrinsic quality of the divinity that he creates, and so forth. Under the construction of Fa'al, we could find, for example, the name Adl, right? And that means that justice is an enduring trait, an intrinsic trait of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And finally, let's go to the construction Fa'lan. There are some who might argue that Rahman is As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha because it falls under that same weight of Fa'lan. And again, in the intricacies of Arabic, there would be arguments back and forth because if we want to get technical, Fa'lan is As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha when the mu'annath form, the female form, is Fa'la. So, for example, Atshan is As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha because its female gender form, I know a lot of colloquial Arabic speakers would say, well, if the man is Atshan, the woman is Atshana, but in classical Arabic it is Atsha. So Ghadban and Ghadba, that is how one would do that, and Rahman doesn't quite follow that rule. So some say that Rahman, its construction, is also As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha, that it is an enduring trait, and of course it is an enduring trait. I myself feel that Rahman does not follow precisely the technical rule, and in my opinion, I think that Rahman is a unique construction, and that is why it carries that unique status that Ud'u Allah wa ud'u Rahman, call upon Allah or call upon Ar-Rahman, or وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا, that the servants of Ar-Rahman, that it is the only one that substitutes for Allah. But in any case, God knows best. But hopefully now that we understand that there is a construction of As-Sifa al-Mushabbaha, and many of the names do indeed fall under that construction, it again enhances our spirituality to understand that its intent in Arabic is that it is an enduring, everlasting, intrinsic quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that, I'd like to end this series then, and I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed it and learned something from it. Of course, we did not cover the 99 names, and even if we covered them all, we would not be able to say enough about them. That really is a lifetime endeavor. But I sincerely hope that it may be something that would enhance spirituality, give different ways of knocking on the door of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and different ways of thinking about His magnificence. I hope, insha'Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept my dua and your dua, and that when we knock on the door, we will find the most merciful close at hand. And once again, I am sure I have made mistakes, and my understanding is incomplete. I would like you to bear witness for me that I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive those mistakes, because that is certainly not my intent. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless you.